The red button is on.
Yay.
We're live. We're live on Facebook with the outstandingly fabulous Katie Coombs and the brilliantly wonderful Jillian Johnsrud, all the way from Montana in America, which sounds like a big deal, except you haven't actually traveled anywhere. Of course, it's through the wonders of modern technology. Jillian, you're in your office, aren't you? Tell us about your office.
This is my new to me office / old to me camper that I travel with my 5 kiddos all around the country. But during shelter in place, when my kids are home from school and I don't have an office, this is where I'm at now.
I think it's fabulous. So just as people jump on the live stream, I'm just going to check in, make sure that it's all good. It looks like we're live. It's fantastic. There's a bunch of people watching already. We've got Russell, Emma, Humble Penny Ken is watching.
Hey,
Chad
Ken.
Hill, who I know you've met, Chad, is watching from California. So we've got a bunch of people joining us. I'm going to read out something from your website, Jillian, because I think it's new information to me. I mean, I kind of knew some of your story, but I'm just going to read this because I think this is absolutely phenomenal. So your website talks about you had $55,000 worth of debt when you were 19 from credit cards, student loans, medical debt, but you had some big dreams, wanted to take mini retirements. You paid off all of your debt, traveled to 27 places, different countries. You lived abroad for 4 years, took 5 mini retirements, adopted some children, had some of your own children, paid cash for your first home, and became financially independent at 32. Now, I know, I can tell by the look on Katie's face, we're both wondering what on earth we've been doing with our life for all of the things that you've achieved, which is phenomenal. And I know we're going to dive into that. Jack's going to put a link to your website at the bottom. It would be just like, I don't know what to start. I'm so excited. This is fantastic. So Jillian, look, you're a coach and you're specialized in people's financial planning, career transitions, and helping them start and grow their own small business. If I got that right, or is there a different aspect? Cool.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, I have a few different interests and I like variety. And so I kind of picked those 3 areas, or maybe conventional wisdom would say, just pick one thing and go all in. I get bored easy. So I like to mix it up.
And how long have you been doing the coaching thing, Jillian? Because I want to dive into this. I know it's something that you mentioned on the email to me earlier on, and I know is of interest to lots of people watching. We wanted to dive in a little bit into the journey that you went through. What made you want to become a coach, and who gave you permission to do that, Jillian?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So real honest moment, why I wanted to become a coach. And I say that because it's a little bit embarrassing, but sometimes we have these motivations that stem from our childhood. And I just say, just go with it. And it can be like an itch that just feels really good to scratch. So growing up, I actually became really inspired by Oprah. Like I refer to her as Auntie Oprah in my own mind. But just this idea that like we have agency, that we can change and we can grow and we can take actions and make something different of our life. But growing up, there was a whole bunch of people in my life that I really, really cared about that didn't have that same belief, that didn't, maybe as a kid, I wanted them to change, but they didn't want to change, or I thought they could change, but they didn't believe they could change. And I just had all of this pent up desire of like, I really want people to be able to grow and to change and to see their agency and to take action. And it never really came to fruition. And so to some degree, my adult life is letting that come to fruition, to give other people the help and the gift that I really wish people from my childhood would have had someone give them.
Yeah, very nice. I've experienced some of your coaching firsthand, and I'm sure we'll dive into this at some point during the next hour. We had an emotional hour and a half or so chat about, it was about a year ago, almost to the day, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious to know, and I think lots of people would be really interested to know from you, did you go through a learning program? Did you take a qualification, or did you decide to go down your own path? What was those early days of when you were, getting ready to start coaching? What did that look like and feel like for you?
So I would say that, like a lot of coaches, we're very internally motivated towards it, and we constantly seek it out. So I always loved teaching. I always raised my hand to do that. I loved training people. I loved coaching people. So I became that person at every job. I became the person who trained people, who coached them, and eventually that meant I managed people and I managed teams and I was in charge of hiring. And then eventually, when I was 22, I started at the job I was at, I did the professional development plans for all of the employees. That was one of my tasks. And it was one of the first times that my first kind of big aha moments, because I did these plans. The employees loved them. They're like, this is fantastic. The people at corporate were like, these are great plans. And if you've worked in a corporate environment, this might not surprise you, but nobody even batted an eye that 95% of them didn't work. Like, they were totally unconcerned that these were totally ineffective plans. They were like, it's a great plan. So I started to realize, so sometimes good plans fail. I wonder why that is. Like, if I've given you a fantastic plan, why isn't it coming to fruition? And in that job, I realized it was more in that I was creating a plan based on this kind of corporate structure, but there was a huge disconnect with these individuals' deep motivations, their deep values, their desires for their life. There was no check on that form to add any of this to the plan. It was just a corporate professional development plan. And so that was kind of my first, here's why this isn't working moment. And then I transitioned, I became a youth pastor, and I was like, perfect. Okay, I'm going to take all of this that I've learned in the corporate environment, and now I'm going to work with like people, and I get to add in like things they care about and their values and their motivations, and this will be fantastic. And most of those plans failed too. So this was like 24. But I realized it's great if you have that part, but you also have to be willing to address the challenges and the fears and the hesitations and what's actually holding people back. And at 24, I just wasn't equipped or ready or emotionally intelligent enough to have those conversations.
Great stuff. As you were chatting then, it made me think of, I know you get asked very regularly about starting coaching businesses, and I was going to invite people that are watching the live stream. We've got a whole bunch of people watching us that maybe they have a question. We've got people from Russia as well as America and Africa and across the UK, which is super cool. If you have any questions about your own small business, about starting a coaching business, if you have any questions specifically about money, because if you missed the start of this, that Jillian was financially independent at the very senior age of 32. Maybe you have some questions about money too. So please do stick any questions that you have in the thread. We're going to plow on for now, because I know that Katie, I wanted to bring you in because in January of this year, I think it was on your birthday, Jillian, wasn't it? You launched the Everyday Courage podcast, and you had some phenomenal results when you launched in terms of rankings of podcasts, and you launched it in partnership with Choose FI, of course, where we've got the Rebel Entrepreneur podcast that we've just launched. And I know that Katie's listened to your episodes and was excited to go, I get to chat to Jillian because I feel like I know her already. Katie, what stuff has jumped into your mind now that you actually can see Jillian as well as hear her voice?
Well,
Has it triggered new thoughts?
I'm starstruck, first of all, because I've been listening to Jillian in my headphones, and now I'm kind of on my screen. I'm next to her, so it sounds really weird. It seems really. I'm kind of like, I'm a bit shy, and I just don't know where to look, because it feels like I'm next to somebody really famous. But I do. There was something. There was a part of your podcast, and I don't know which episode it was, and I was sweeping the kitchen. And it was a random day in January, and you were talking about rating different parts of your life and mediocre areas of your life. So when things are maybe 8 or 9 or 10, you tend not to take any action around them because it seems to be going quite well, and you're aware of that. When things, whatever it is, friendships, relationships, health, whatever part, work, when it's a 1 or 2, then you're aware that it's going a bit crap. And so maybe you're paying attention to that and thinking, I need to do something. But you absolutely got me. And I was like, yeah, I get that. You got me when you went, and those things that are maybe a 5 or 6 out of 10, the mediocre things, the things that you think are okay, that's what I want you to think about. And I stood there in the middle of our kitchen for a good 10 minutes. I sat down at the table and I was thinking, oh God, there's lots of bits of my life which are a bit mediocre. There's lots that are really good. A few things I need to sort out, but there's quite a bit that's mediocre here, and I don't think about them because I think, well, that's all right. I'm doing all right. I do the grateful thing all the time. Oh, I need to be grateful for that. That's really good. And trying to find the good in things. And I'd never even heard of thinking about your life like that before. And you stopped me dead. And from that moment, I was like, wow, I'm going to listen to this. I was going to say this girl, which is really, really patronizing, but it nearly came out. So I'll just fess up to it. This person, Jillian. And I've been listening to her season 1. I've not got on to the next bit yet, but I'm still in season 1. And I love your podcast. And I left a review, and I've never, ever put a review on a podcast before. And if I'm quite honest, I very rarely listen to podcasts.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, you've changed it for me. So that's why I'm all a bit sort of starstruck.
Oh, perfect. Did you finish sweeping the kitchen, Katie? That was what went through my mind.
No, I left it. It was fine. It was about 6 out of 10. I left it.
I think I completely understand where you're coming from. I experienced one of those 10-minute silence moments about this time last year when I was sat in a room with Jillian, and we talked about splashing about in the pool as a metaphor for dealing with difficult things and leaning in. And we're going to get into some of this stuff because I know Jillian wants to talk about that, and I'm going to deny most of what she's about to say. But we've got a couple of questions that have come in. The first is that Kerry was interested in what you coach, what's your specialties, and I mentioned it at the start, but it would be really nice to hear in your own words, Jillian, what you specialize in, and then so I'll sort of follow up to that is that Oliver has put in the comment he's interested in the term, he's picked up the term grow the gap. He really wants you to elaborate on that and what you mean by that. So if you could talk to those two things for a couple of moments, that would be fab.
Yeah. So I tend to specialize in 3 basic areas. One is people's personal finances, especially if people feel really overwhelmed and kind of their relationship with money is a relationship filled with anxiety or fear or frustration. Every time they sit down to engage with their money, it's not like, oh, this is like my favorite way to spend a Friday night. I love doing this. It conjures up some other things because I feel like money can be fairly simple. It's not, I've been helping my 6th grader with math. Oh my gosh, 6th grade math is so much harder than personal finance. Like I can't figure it out. But oftentimes our relationship with money is what creates all of that confusion and conflict. So I do that. I also, because I have made a lot of career transitions, I've taken a lot of mini retirements. I did retire early. I'm kind of part of this FIRE movement, a financial independence retire early. I help a lot of people with job transitions. So if you kind of feel stuck in a job, but you have kind of this dream and this goal, and you've been really good with your money and you want to leverage some of that financial freedom that you've created to be able to make a change, I kind of help people walk through that change. And I work in entrepreneurship, people who are kind of wanting to take this thing they're passionate about and turn it into income. So it's oftentimes service providers So like therapists or massage therapists or other coaches or anyone who kind of runs a service-based business. Okay, so those are the three things. And the other question was grow the gap. So in part of my money is somewhat simple. My 6-word financial plan advice is you have to guard the gap and you have to grow the gap. And the gap is the difference between your expenses and your income. So you want to make that wider. For some people, their greatest area of opportunity is increasing their income. For other people, their greatest area of opportunity is decreasing their expenses. But you want to grow that space in between your income and your expenses. And then you want to guard that gap. And guarding oftentimes looks like starting to invest, maybe starting to invest in a business, starting to invest in stocks or real estate, or paying down your debt, or starting to save for that next big purchase. But anything that you're doing to put towards kind of a long-term or a short-term goal or debt payoff is guarding the gap versus being like, oh my gosh, I have like an extra $500 a month now. Sweet. We're going to go on vacation. That's spending the gap, which sometimes can be fun, but trying to guard the gap.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. I mean, I'm curious that you seem to have discovered a different way of thinking about money and behaving with money that most people take a long time to either discover or never discover it at all, because we don't get that kind of education. How come you discovered this at such a young age? Was that a reaction against, oh my God, look at this debt I've built up and I'm not even 20 yet? How did you discover the FIRE movement? Did you do it by accident yourself to begin with and then found FIRE later, or was it the other way around?
Yeah, I as most things that I've learned, I learned because I had to. I learned because how I grew up and where I grew up in the situation just wasn't productive to get me to my goals. It was unhelpful to get me where I wanted to go. And so it was figuring out why that was, figuring out what was broken, what wasn't working, what mindsets or ideas weren't helpful, and then constantly testing that in my own life. But because I am by nature a coach and a teacher and a helper, testing that with other people. I remember my very first coaching client, I was 25, so like 12 years ago. And she had a good income and she had good savings, and like I explained the concepts and it just didn't work. And I was like, no, wait a minute. Like I explained this very clearly. Like, why is this not working? So most of the things I discovered was through failing a lot, thinking, oh, this is easy, I'll just explain it, and it not working at all. And then going, well, I wonder why that didn't work. And just staying curious and figuring out that most people's financial mistakes comes from some of it's lack of education, but I think that's like 3% of it. Most of it is how we relate to money, because our actions are driven by the thoughts that we think and the emotions that we feel. Creates our habits, which is actions repeated, but that's what drives all of our actions. You feel hungry, you eat. You think, oh, I'm late for work, and you hurry out the door. If your thoughts and your emotions towards something like money are not helpful for you to take the actions you need to take, you're probably not going to do it. So we really have to kind of peel back that layer and figure out what those things are so that the education piece can actually take root.
Oh, you made me all thoughtful.
Oh, yeah, I forgot I was on then.
Katie, did you write that down? That sounded really, really good. Because that's a great point, isn't it? Because we often talk about that at PopUp. We could give you the best business education in the world. In fact, we believe that we do, but you're not necessarily going to take the medicine. You're not necessarily going to follow those steps if your thoughts and your actions are not congruent with that stuff. And actually, fear is a key one, isn't it? Yes. That prevents us from taking the steps that we need to take. And I think one of the things that's really struck me about the FIRE movement recently is that how I used to think was if I wanted or needed to make more money, I'll just create the side hustle, level up the business, get a bigger job, and that's where the extra money was going to come from. But without realizing, of course, that it doesn't matter how big the job was or how successful the business was. I wasn't guarding what you call guarding the money, and the gap never seemed to get any bigger. In fact, it just seemed to overlap more than, the more money that was spent. So I'm interested in that stuff for sure. So, when someone comes to you, Jillian, and I know that some of the people that you work with are already in a good place financially. But if someone came to you and they're in a pickle with money and they're in debt, where do you start with that? Do you say to people, look, let's have a look at the money and we need to dial back the debt before anything happens? Or do you look at running things in tandem and help people think about investing whilst they've got debt? What do you think about that stuff?
So they're going to come back to a really basic understanding of finance. So we can examine what are the other biases, thoughts, and emotions that are around kind of 9 basic steps. So they're in groups of 3. The first one is tracking. You have to track your income, you have to track your expenses, and you have to track your net worth. And just that action creates a lot of story and a lot of emotion oftentimes. So I tend to work with people who are fairly good earners, but sometimes their personal finance is a mess. And kind of like you, their solution has been, I'm just going to out-earn this problem. I'm just going to earn more.
That was my strategy. Yeah, for sure.
Because typically higher earners feel really competent and feel really successful in their work. And when we start tracking their income and their net worth and their expenses, they don't feel that. That self-talk and that emotion is confusion, it's frustration, it's shame, it's embarrassment. It's like, how can I be so smart and so successful in this area of my life and have made such a bleeping mess over here? I don't even know what I'm spending. How can a smart, competent person have dropped the ball so badly? How could I be in all this debt? And so if that's your kind of thought and your emotion, of course you're not going to do that on a Friday night. Why would you lean towards that? And there's a really important concept that this is true in entrepreneurship or our money, is we have to separate out discomfort from danger. Because kind of like you talked about, Simon, a lot of people experience fear in entrepreneurship. That discomfort. It is healthy and safe and normal to pivot away from danger. If you're in danger, you should move away from it. But our brain reads those two the same. It feels all this discomfort and it thinks, this is danger. I should pivot away from it. I shouldn't engage with my finances. I shouldn't call that client. I shouldn't start this business. But recognizing that's discomfort. And occasionally it's really, really healthy to lean into discomfort. And so then we start to create different data points, because if your experience managing your money has always created all of this shame and frustration, we sit down and I just do it together. Okay, we're going to go through your expenses together. And at the end of the call, I'm like, how was that? And they're like, it was okay. And that's the first new data point that now we can create a different story, that I can spend time with my money. I can track my expenses. And you know what? It's okay. It was a little uncomfortable, but I got through it and it wasn't too bad. And the more of those data points you create, you can reshape that story and those emotions around it.
Do you, Jillian, do you have any tips or advice for people who want to become financially independent with children? Because I know you have 5 children, that's correct?
Yeah.
And the unpredictability of children as well as somebody said to me years ago that when you have children, they destroy your life and then they build you a new one. And you get used to the new one. And of course, everyone has a different experience, but the richness of the love for your children and everything it brings in family life. But do you have any tips around having children? Because sometimes it's just unpredictable costs, unpredictable things happen, and also the amount of time that they take in your life and how you prioritize your children's well-being above your own many times. Yeah. Obviously, because everything is about helping them get started in life. You put yourself maybe second or third. Any tips around that?
Such a big question. I would say, and this is true for kids or other things, if you have things that are more unpredictable, you have to have a larger gap. You just have to have more margin in your life. So what worked for you before might not work any longer. The basic underlying theme is like what got us from point A to point B might not take us to point C, and we need to reevaluate that. So a lot of people can run lean and fast and loose in their 20s. They don't have a spouse, they don't have kids, they can like spend down to their last dollar and then get paid the next day, and it's okay. And that works for them for that season of life. It does not work when you have kids. You need a lot more margin. And that's true anytime you have anything that can have unpredictable expenses, like a house or a lot of vehicles are going to break down. You're going to have these unexpected expenses. And oftentimes with clients, I'll ask, what if they have all this debt? What was the challenge? Like what caused this to occur? And oftentimes it's like unexpected expenses. And they think it was that thing. But if you peel back a layer, it was more that there wasn't margin. There wasn't planning for the fact that there's going to be unexpected expenses, because they were running it like our fixed expenses hit all of our income. So anything unexpected becomes debt.
I'm going to rename my kids as when I introduce them to people, I'm going to say, these are my unexpected expenses, or children, actually, as they've been known in our house. Unexpected expenses. I love that. Yeah, there's definitely some unexpected expenses, but some expected ones too. When you talk about planning, Jillian, how long do you encourage people to think forward? I guess there's different tactics that you can use. Because I think one of the things that Alan said to me a while ago, which really stuck with me, is that if you haven't got an emergency fund, things tend to go wrong, don't they? But if you have got an emergency fund, whatever that number might look like, I'd be curious to know if you've got a rule of thumb on what that emergency fund is. So in there is a question about planning and about what the time frame is, and what emergency funds might look like for you.
Emergency funds, there again, I think should be based on how many unexpected expenses can you have. So like if you own a house, there can be a lot of big unexpected expenses, where if you rent, not as much. You might have to move, might be an unexpected expense. But so that's part of it. Part of it is how much of a gap do you have? Because if you have a really big gap, that is just a delightful buffer to cover up a multitude of unexpected expenses. And so some people can get by on a small emergency fund, which I would say is like in that maybe 3 months of kind of their basic costs. Some people, I know a lot of early retirees, we tend to keep 1 to 3 years worth of expenses in cash, because we spend all of our income, because we're only pulling the income that we need typically. And there's a lot of variables with the stock market and rental income and all of that. So that's kind of typical sleep easy. And I think if you're an entrepreneur, there again, you should have a little bit higher of an emergency fund, especially if your business isn't very diversified. There's kind of one way you make money. Then you're at a very similar risk of a 9-to-5 employee, that either you have a job or you don't have a job.
Because at the moment, for us, we're burning through our emergency fund at a great rate.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, lockdown, as we're calling it, though I like shelter in place, sounds much more exciting. Lockdown we've realized how much we were spending on stuff that we didn't need. So we do the spreadsheet and we go through it. And then we kid ourselves a little bit, and look away possibly. And then it's really made us focus, because we're not even on petrol. So we've got we're not driving anywhere. So we're saving a fortune on petrol. So we're reevaluating, do we need 2 cars now? So it's taking just being on lockdown has made us really think of how cheaply we can live. And really how much we're very lucky. So we've kind of been enjoying this phase. How much fun we're having I've been in the park playing, I can hardly walk. I've been in the park playing football for 3 hours and had just the time of our lives. I can barely hobble down the stairs. Yeah, we wouldn't normally do that. I'd throw £50 at the cinema and we'd all be there with buckets of popcorn watching something we don't like.
Yep.
And actually, we've just gone with the ball was burst, to be honest, and we still had a great time, and it didn't cost anything. So it's made us reevaluate and made life much more simple. And we are still burning cash because we're not earning. But I don't know what my point was, but anyway, there it is. I've just said stuff.
I think that is a great, though, it's a great thing to be mindful of, is that we have all been thrust into this unplanned, unrequested experiment. And we're creating all of these new data points that can reshape how we think and feel about our spending and how we're spending our money and how we're spending our time and what we actually enjoy and what we're now fully convinced that we don't enjoy. So in this process, trying to stay really open and really curious and take in all of that information so you can decide what you want life to look like when things move forward to their new normal. Because we probably, we never get to go back. We aren't going to go back to normal. We just move forward. So what do you want that forward to look like?
Love that. I wonder if we've had a couple of questions, Jillian, that I was going to dive into in a second. So folks, please post your questions. If you've got anything you'd like to ask Jillian about starting and growing a incredibly successful coaching business, launching a podcast that makes the top 10 on iTunes. I forget what the ranking was, but it's a phenomenal result in the first week. Jillian, what did it reach? What was the hit?
Yeah, in self-help, it was like 7 and 8 and 10, and it kind of bounced around there with some of my favorite podcasters. So it was fun. It felt like renting a vacation house. You go away on holiday and you're like, ooh, I really like this. This is fantastic. What if one day we bought a house here? And then you go home and you start scheming. How could we be there more often? How could we be there permanently? I very much liked that spot on those charts. Sure. So
excellent bragging rights for that. That's phenomenal. So if you've got questions about podcasting, questions about starting and growing a coaching business, questions about money and career transition, I'm going to ask a question about how to decide when you've got multiple ideas as to which direction to go in, because I think we had a really rich conversation about that, which I think we should share with everybody. Before we go there, Jillian, a question from Emma. Emma is in the early stages of launching her coaching business.
Nice.
And she'd love to know how you started up and found your audience and found your clients. I think there may be a niching question buried beneath that which is quite tough for many coaches, isn't it, to choose where to focus in terms of where those clients came from. What was that process like for you in the early days, and how did you decide the direction to head in?
Yeah, I originally started writing, and it was out of that blogging that I kind of started like this online coaching business. But like I said, it had always been kind of mixed in with my DNA. So I'd always done public teaching and like talks, and I'd done some coaching just in my community, in my circle of friends. And I think that that's how you kind of start. One of my general life rules is that confidence and clarity come through doing. So if you don't feel like you have a ton of confidence, or if you don't have a ton of clarity around an idea, just start doing it. And in the process of doing it and testing it and scaling it, that's how you figure everything out. That's how you figure out what you like to teach. That's what you figure out what works, what doesn't work. That's how you can iterate and make things better. So oftentimes with new coaches who are like just trying to get started, I just encourage find your first 3. Even if they're free clients, even if they're discounted clients, just start with those first 3, because you're going to learn. You're going to learn about yourself, about your strengths, about your skills, about your weaknesses, about the market, about what's most helpful for people. My general kind of go-to phrase is, I have an hour, maybe I can help. And I try to say that when I first started, I tried to say it twice a day, because I think you just have to do that 1,000 times. Call it 1,000 seeds. I have an hour. Maybe I can help. I don't know if I can help, but maybe. But I have an hour for free for you. So I call it a seed, and it's very small and specific. It's an hour. Not I will coach you for a year. Not you can have my entire Saturday, but I have an hour. And because you don't have that confidence and that clarity yet, you say, maybe I can help. I don't know if I can help. And I help people do things so far outside of my expertise, so far outside of my skill set. I'm not making any promises here. I say, I've got an hour. Maybe I can help. And usually that gives you a few things. It tells you what people think you can help with. It tells you what they want help with. It tells you what you enjoy helping with. And at the end, you say, what was most helpful? And then you figure out what actually was most helpful for that person. And those 4 pieces of information shape your business going forward.
I think that's lovely advice. It almost inoculates you against the fear of getting started, doesn't it? To go, I don't know if I can help this person or not. I know lots and lots of coaches at different stages, and I've been coached myself, and I know that fear of what happens if I get a client and it doesn't go very well, and I don't know how to help them. Then what do I do?
Yeah.
You know, did you go through those emotions, Jillian, or did your process of maybe I can help? I have an hour, maybe I can help. Did that protect you from those sort of fears?
It definitely helps, because you're not talking yourself up or making any hard promises. I think everyone struggles a little bit with imposter syndrome. And against that, I had to develop the mindset, and it's what I encourage other people, is that you don't have to be the most experty expert. Because whenever someone thinks about being a coach, they go, oh, but like, I'm not the best. I'm not the smartest. I'm not so-and-so or so-and-so. And guess what? None of us are. I'm not the most experty expert. Simon's not the most experty expert. I bet you could name 3 people that you're like, they're smarter than me. They know more. They're more accomplished. They have more experience.
Yeah, 2 of them are on this live stream with me.
So that was my line. That was my line.
And so there's 2 things here. One, it makes no sense for there only to be one person who can help other people in the world. And this is true for anything. The world needs more than one graphic designer. The world needs more than one chef, because they don't have the bandwidth and you can't afford them. So like, it's okay if you're not the most experty expert. But then the other side of that is there's things specifically about you, your story, your voice, your perspective, your experience, your circle of influence that's going to connect with people and resonate with people and be more effective than the person who's actually the more experty expert.
For sure. I love this expression. I'm going to steal this. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
Breaking news. We are not the most experty experts, and that's okay. Jillian, you just reminded me actually that conversations with you are very, very dangerous, because with each sentence that comes out of your mouth, there is less excuses for any of us to make this progress and get started and get things going, which I think is testimony to some of your skill. And we've got a couple more questions I wanted to dive in on. One from Helen Lawson. Now, Helen is a well-being expert, and she's doing well-being stuff in the workplace. I know that this question is going to resonate with you, and I know that you would have been on your own journey with this. It's to do with pricing. She said, how do you know your own value when you're charging for a service business? I still really struggle with this as a workplace well-being trainer, and now branching into being a consultant. And she says, I still feel a bit of a fraud using that term. So I think the imposter syndrome that you talk to is very real for Helen right now. But how do you know your own value? How do you know how to charge and having the confidence to charge buoyant prices for the stuff that you do? What's that journey been like for you?
Yeah, I actually flip kind of the conventional wisdom upside down on this, because the conventional wisdom is like, know your worth, know your value, charge what you're worth. But I kind of feel like not all of my time is worth the same. I spend my time on a lot of different things, and I can't charge everybody for all of those things. Like, I'm a pretty mediocre gardener. I can't charge the same for that skill set as I can for other things. So I think it's much easier to charge the value of the transformation you're creating for that specific person. So it's less about me, because if it's about me, we get stuck on like, am I worth that much? Like, should someone pay me that much? And more about what kind of transformation are we creating for other people, and what is it worth to them specifically? So it depends on your audience. And here's the best part: you get to pick your audience. You might have an audience, you're the same you provide the exact same skill. If I provided in my financial coaching, if I coached single moms who were on welfare, I gave them my exact same training, I can't charge the same amount, because for them, it's one, they don't have the money, but there's less ROI for them. Because we can shift the needle a little bit, but I can't do magical things. Where I could take my exact same skill set and I could help, like I said, I typically help kind of high earners if I'm doing real personal finance stuff, who feel a little stressed out by their money. I can do high ROI things for them. The amount of money they pay me, they will get back 5, 10, 100-fold in their net worth. And so it's a no-brainer for them. So I think you have to put it more on who you're helping. And if you feel like, man, this client base I'm working with, it's just not that valuable for them, pick different customers. Pick someone who it is, the amount of money you want to make is a fantastic deal for that person.
So are you saying there, Jillian, that you charge different rates for different people?
No, I'm saying I pick the people that I work with based on the rate that makes sense in my business.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Excuse
Seth
me.
Godin has a great I love Seth Godin. He is an experty expert. I am not Seth. We just read and study the experty experts. But he has this great his book, This is Marketing. It's one of my favorite marketing books, but he goes into that idea in detail of like how you get to pick your quadrant of the marketplace. Marketplaces are big. There's lots of options. Pick the one that you feel competent in. Pick the one that is exciting for you. Pick the one that pays you what you want to get paid. Pick the one that you'll gain the most traction. But you get to pick it. And if you don't like your client base, pick a different client base.
Yeah, nice. I think the thing that was going through my mind as you were chatting then was when you mentioned Seth Godin, reminded me of the Icarus Deception. And let's just talk for a moment. We've had a couple of questions. I'm going to get to the questions in a moment. Someone's asking a question about the blog and about how you made money from that and what that was like. But just before we go there, Jillian, when you've got lots and lots of ideas and there's a whole bunch of very creative people watching and they get paralyzed, when I say they, I mean me, as well as others, we get paralyzed when we're trying to choose an idea or figure out which direction to go in. And I think I've got this history of, going into a creative project with loads of energy. I burn like phosphorus. 3 days later, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I burn out, go back onto something else. And for years, I've been going around this cycle of dipping into creative projects, meanwhile running the day job and, running PopUp, and before PopUp, sort of the jobs that I was doing before. How do you help people? And maybe it'd be useful to dive back to that conversation that we had. What was the thing that was going on when you were coaching me this time last year, figuring out where to lean? And you talk about leaning in as your expression. Could you talk to that maybe for a few minutes, Jillian?
Yeah, so there's a few different things there, but kind of dialing back into what the basic structure of coaching is. It's typically, and I always recommend some type of coaching if you want to get outside of your comfort zone or outside of your expertise. Like, for that purpose, you need a person and you need a process. And those are two different things. Both of them can be in coaching, but coaching can be one or the other, not necessarily both. So in our conversation, it wasn't a process. I didn't say, okay, Simon, here's the game plan. Here's how you have to set up your marketing. Here's like all the steps you need to take. And there was no process. It was the person. And as the person, the job is to stay really curious. It's to pay really close attention. It's to ask questions that the other person might not ask themselves, and to slowly notice patterns and to notice motivations, to understand their motivations and to understand what's holding them back. And that person side of coaching is more about this premise and this belief that people are smart and they're creative and they're resourceful and they're capable, and it's in them. It's maybe discombobulated. It's maybe kind of all mixed together and covered, but it's in them. And our job is to kind of help, I call it sort and dig through some of the clutter, sort things out, so that they can find their clarity and their confidence. And so that's the person side. If you need a person in a process, you need a person who can do that. So if you find yourself in patterns that are unhelpful for your goals, you might need a person to help you sort that out. And they don't have to be the most experty expert. There's a lot of different people. It could be a super smart friend. It could be like a really emotionally intelligent coworker or spouse or therapist or coach or like mentor. Like there's lots of different people who possess that skill set and have worked on that skill set. But you need someone outside to kind of see that, because we'll just spin our wheels. We'll run around in circles all day long and never get anywhere.
Could I ask, Jillian, have you had training? Is there a type of training or certification for coaches? How does that whole area work?
Yeah, there's a lot of different programs out there. I encourage people. I always have a bias towards simplicity, and I always have a bias towards action. So there again, in that 1,000 seeds, I have an hour, maybe I can help. Start with your first 3 clients, start with your first 10 clients. And then once you realize what you need, go get the thing that you need. Oftentimes, preparation is another form of procrastination. I see a lot of people procrastinate either through perfection or through preparation. Man, they will spend years preparing because they're scared to start. Mm-hmm. But if you just start, you'll figure out, this is the book I need to read. This is the class I need to take. This is the course I need to take. This is the person I need to work with. That becomes clear if you're on the journey doing the work. So my bias is always towards simplicity. It's always towards action. I would say get started, and then the teacher will appear. You'll find the person or the course or the book that you're like, yep, that's exactly what I need.
Yeah, I love that, because of course you don't really know necessarily what you need until you get going, do you? And it's that sort of vicious cycle. Yep. Jillian, before we go on to the blog question, the other thing that was on my mind when we chatted, and I think this was some of the presenting that you were doing at the Chautauqua conference last year, which really resonated with me. You had a word, dysregulation, which Henry from the PopUp team uses regularly now, bless him. Nice. It's a really nice word. We didn't understand it to start with, but you had a lovely metaphor of splashing around in the deep end of the pool. And I know that was, we got into some of that conversation in our session as well. Could you just talk to that? What do you mean by dysregulation, and how do we guard ourselves against it? Because that was a really lovely metaphor.
Thank you. I'm trying to see if I have one of my pictures here. I'm a drawer of pictures. I don't know if I have it. Okay. So dysregulation. Oh, I'm out of focus. There we go.
There you go.
This is something that we adopted from foster care 15 15 years ago, I became a mom. We adopted from foster care. We adopted a teenager who had a lot of emotional struggles and a lot of educational struggles and health struggles. So we jumped in the deep end. But in your training for being a foster parent, we talk a lot about dysregulation. And if you think about kind of this nice, calm baseline, and on the top, there's a volcano, and on the bottom, there's an iceberg. When we are in stressful situations, if we are in conflict, fearful situations, we have a typical response where we move up kind of that volcano, and that might feel like anger or agitation or anxiety or fear or nervousness, or we move down like an iceberg, and we withdraw and we get quiet and we start binging Netflix and we avoid and we kind of shut down. And you'll see this all the time in couples. Whenever they fight, they have very predictable ways that they either move up the scale in volcano land, or they move down the scale in iceberg land. And oftentimes icebergs marry volcanoes, and that pattern is very predictable. Someone starts raising their voice, the other person is really quiet. And then the quiet person, if you push them hard enough, they're like, I'm done, and they walk out of the room. So knowing that this is like our normal response, this is our natural kind of healthy response. And this is where we kind of separate discomfort from danger, because that can feel very uncomfortable to be in that spot. And so that's why I use the illustration. It's like jumping in the deep end of a pool when you aren't very good at swimming and thrashing about. Like, it's that kind of discomfort. That my general rule of thumb is take your top high level goals, your high level priorities, and lean into that discomfort, those actions that are really going to move that forward 3 times a week for 30 minutes. That's all you need. You should not live in dysregulation all the time. That's very unhealthy. That gives you stress and anxiety and heart disease, and you die young. So if you're in a job where you're constantly dysregulated, it's probably not a great fit. If you're in a relationship where you're constantly dysregulated, that's not super healthy. If your friends and family constantly dysregulate you, you need to spend less time with those people. But if it's a priority, if it's something you care about, 3 times a week, 30 minutes, feel that discomfort. But then here's the key. You need a toolbox of things that bring you back to center. Because that story and that emotion and that data point, if you're like, okay, Jillian said to go do the hard, scary thing, and I'm going to feel anxious and dysregulated, but it's going to be okay. I just have to do it for 30 minutes. And you get super elevated and nervous, and you can't bring yourself back down. Then that data point creates a story that goes, this sucks. That was horrible advice. I'm never doing that again. What the hell was she thinking? So we need these tools, and we need to use them frequently, and we need to have security that they work so you can go do the hard, scary thing. And then you're like, okay, and my tools are, I did it for 30 minutes. Now I'm going to go for a walk, and I'm going to call a friend, and I'm going to eat a brownie, and I'm going to make a cup of tea, and then I'm going to take a hot bath. And you go, that was hard, but you know what? It was okay. And I made progress.
Yes, very nice. That's super nice. Katie, how do you, what's your toolkit for getting out of the deep end of the pool after you've been dysregulated? What do you do to relax after the terror of a pop-up business school?
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, you're muted, Katie. That was an exciting bit. I do that all the time. How great.
Do you know what I said as well? Do you know what I said? I said I tend to be quiet. I like quiet, and I was muted. I like quiet. So I've labeled myself as an introvert. I don't really know if I am, but I decided that that's the label I'm going to go with, and under the banner of shyness. It's kind of where I operate from. But I know also I can speak and I can talk in front of people. And then when I get into flow, it feels a lot better, and I feel better about myself and more confident. But it's exhausting. So afterwards, I literally do have to go and lie down. So after Pop-Up Business School, we tend to go out for dinner, and I need to have I always say, I need like an hour where I'm not speaking to anybody or listening to anybody. I just want to lie down and just be quiet. At home with my family, again, I go for a walk. And when we have problems with children or having an argument, or we'll get hysterical, which happens quite a bit, we tend to go out for a walk. And even if we're just quiet, we just go to walk in the woods and say, let's listen to the birds. I don't want any talking. We're all going to listen to the birds. And at first, one pulls the face a bit and stomps the feet. And after a couple of minutes, we just listen to the leaves rustling and the birds, and we can all calm down a little bit. But that's as much as I've got, really.
Very nice. Man, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Love it. Love it.
My general guideline is to know those things that dysregulate you. They're high leverage, but they dysregulate you, and plan your schedule accordingly. So for 1 to 4 hours after you do that hard dysregulating thing, you need to engage in activities that bring you back to center. Because then that does build that confidence of like, I did that hard thing, but then I went for a walk and I spent some time alone and I was fine, versus I did that hard thing and then it blew up my day. Like I can never do that again, because all of those meetings, all of that difficult work I had planned afterwards was shot. So just plan it smartly.
Jillian, I can't believe that an hour has gone by. We've just got a few minutes left. We could carry on this conversation for at least another 2 or 3 hours quite easily, for sure. I wanted to make sure that we answered a couple of the questions that came in. It's a little out of flow, actually, because we've gone down this route, but that was my fault. So Stephen Murray asked the question a little earlier about the blogging side of things, and about how that growth of the blog worked for you in terms of monetization, and what was that journey like? How did you monetize, and how quickly did that happen for you from when you first started writing?
Yeah, when I started writing, I wasn't necessarily thinking about building a business. I was thinking about writing. I wanted a place to test some ideas and to develop that craft. And I've done very little by the way of affiliates or ads, because that wasn't my intention. Like for each of us, we really have to know that core motivation that pushes us forward. And for me, it was helping people change their lives. Like that's what drives me. That's what excites me. That's what keeps me moving forward. So ads on my site wasn't exactly that. But it's a great platform if you're not sure what you want to write about. Confidence and clarity comes in doing. Just start writing. You'll figure it out. If you're not sure who you want to write to, just start writing and you'll figure it out. And you'll figure out other things that you enjoy, other things that you don't enjoy. So one of the very first things that I started is I started taking on freelance writing clients, because I really liked the writing and I liked the SEO and I liked sales copy. And I found all of that really interesting and exciting. So I started doing freelance writing. I kind of liked the design of it. So I started doing a little bit of web design. And all of this is like paid practice. Other people are paying you to grow that skill set and to grow your confidence. So I don't do either of those now, but I still use them in my own business. And then I started coaching, and I put that offer on my site because I had an audience there. I had an audience of people who had heard from me, who, there again, you don't have to be the most experty expert, but they liked my ideas, they liked my perspective. There were areas of my story that made sense to them, and that they could see we were on similar paths. So I found my first like online clients that way. And one of the best benefits of creating things online is that it welcomes you into a community of people who do similar things. And I firmly believe that everyone who's super successful in one area knows other people who are successful in that same area. Entrepreneurs know other entrepreneurs, authors know other authors, bodybuilders know other bodybuilders. So starting that creating process like welcomes you into this larger community of people who are doing what you want to do. And like I said, you need people and you need a process. You might find that person once you jump into that community.
Very nice. Jillian, this has been super inspiring. I want to read out a message from Helen, who was the well-being consultant who asked that question earlier on. She's posted a lovely message, and then I'm going to ask you where people should start if they wanted to check out more of your work. Well, is there an article they should read? Which podcast episode should they go to? We'll come to that in a second. I'm going to read you this message first because it's awesome. So Helen has said, Jillian is brilliant. Number 1, how does she look so fabulous with 5 kids? Number 2, can she read us a bedtime story? Such a reassuring and calming presence. Found this really impactful, up there with Year of Yes by Rhonda Rhimes. Thanks for all of it. So I think that kind of sums up beautifully the inspiration that you've shared with us tonight. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Katie, for being amazing as ever.
Thank you.
Where should we go, Jillian, to check out some more stuff? Which podcast episode might you point people to, or which page on your website should they go to find out a little more, do you think?
So if you like podcasts, go to my podcast. If you like Instagram, go to my Instagram. Or on my site, I have 2 kind of free video courses. One's about intentional living, and the other's about kind of that grow the gap, guard the gap. So if you want to figure out your money stuff, I would do that one. If you just want kind of general life planning, having a little bit more focus and clarity, I would do that 10-day course. And each day I send like a little email and a free video and a little worksheet, and you can just run with it. And I'm Jillian Johnsrud everywhere, on Twitter, on Instagram. You can search Apple Podcast, my name, and you'll find my podcast, or my website. Or you can just shoot me an email.
There you go. Or we can send a pigeon or something like that. We've got all of the methods
pigeons.
to
just
reach.
Tell the pigeon, Jillian Johnsrud in Montana.
I love it. So we're going to post this video on the PopUp Business School Survival Guide, as we do with all of the live streams that we've done. It's been absolutely brilliant. Next week, folks, we've got the amazing Scott is coming from, who Katie knows as well. We've been working with Scott from the branding agency based in Scotland called Hampton. Scott is going to come on Tuesday next week and help us with branding and marketing for small businesses. And this guy has got lots of experience. He's an absolute genius, and he's been helping the Pop-Up Business School figure out the direction of our brand. And that's very real for us at the moment. So I'm sure we'll dive into that too. So if you need help with your brand, with putting yourself out there with some of the creative elements and how you should portray yourself to the world, we will see you on Tuesday next week at 9 p.m. with Scott from Hampton. It remains for me to say, thank you very much, Jillian, for your time. Thank you, Katie. You're both amazing. I feel inspired. I feel a little teary again, not for the first time, Jillian. And stay safe, both of you, and we'll catch up very soon.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Bye-bye. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Bye.